this week's program. We're going to be looking at the dairy season. We're also going to find out what's likely to be happening as far as returns for the vegetable growers. And we're going to have a good old look at somebody who's breeding some very, very good Arabian horses. But in just a moment or two, it's Farm Accounting. Kerry, Bay of Plenty floods, is there any continuation as far as that situation is concerned?
Yeah, like a lot of the natural disasters, the government have stepped in along with IRD to try and sort of help the people out that are up there. They've put an order in council through which says that any use of money interest charged will be remitted. So that's a bit of a saving, especially when you can't pay on time, that sort of thing.
Yeah, use of money is when you don't make your payments on time.
Yeah, so basically IRD say, well, you used our money, so we're going to charge you interest. So it's a bit like the bank charging on overdraft. But they've said in this case, because it's not your fault, then we'll remit that. But you've got to prove that you were affected by the floods. So you can't just say, well, I'm in the Bay of Plenty, I've been affected.
There'll be those who will try.
There will be, there always is. And the other side of it is that any late filing penalties, again, they'll cancel those when appropriate. And they've just sort of said, look, talk to your accountant if you're struggling to pay. And if you're a bit swamped with things, just talk to your accountant. They can talk to IRD and just liaise and keep them updated so they can keep the pressure off you while you recover.
The key is being able to prove that you were in fact affected.
Yes, definitely. You just can't say it. You've got to be able to show that your property was impacted in one way or another. Or if you're a rural business, for example, and all of a sudden all your customers have disappeared and you've got no cash flow, again, that would be an impact of the flood. So, yeah, you've got to look at what's happened to your business and try and talk to IRD about it.
That wouldn't be hard to prove, would it? Because you've got bank statements and cash flow.
Oh, exactly.
Situation.
Yeah. So if you're a rural business, that's simple. You can say, look, I had all these bookings, they've all cancelled, I've got nothing in my bank account, give me a hand sort of thing, give me a chance.
Or the other thing is all the expenses to replace the fences.
Exactly.
You've got those as well.
Exactly. So it's pretty evident as to what the impact would be.
IRD moving on people who aren't playing the game.
Yeah, so we've got a couple of little tax cases come out recently, and there's some messages in there that people got to think about. The first one was we've got a plasterer, not farm related, but he's pocketed cash from doing various jobs, and so he's received 8 months home detention. It was a substantial amount of tax that he had, but the IRD made the point that they've been advertising heavily and had a campaign about cash jobs and that sort of thing, and people have got to stop doing it. So there's a warning for people out there, if you are pocketing cash from anything you do, especially on the farm, so your hay sales, your stock sales, that sort of thing, think twice, because they will be keeping an eye out. They are coming after this sort of thing.
Cashies used to be very prevalent, but they don't seem to be now. I'm talking about sort of things happening, cutting down trees or whatever.
It's just about dried up because people just don't want to take that risk. It's policed pretty heavily. IRD have got the software now to benchmark, to see what people are doing. They know, and if they find one person doing it, they'll follow a trail and see if further down the track you were involved as well. So it's best to play it safe and actually declare that cash.
So the old saying of what's it going to cost me if I give you cash is gone.
Exactly, yeah.
Don't offer it.
You can try it, but it's not going to work. Most people are going to turn and say, look, it's not much difference. We're going to have to give you an invoice, so no point in doing it.
I'd love the people who write out a cash cheque and give it to
yes.
them.
Yeah, it doesn't work. And then the other case was we've got an Auckland restaurant where they did the same sort of thing. They pocketed a lot of cash, but also filed false income tax and GST returns. And again, they've been hit with home detention. But the point in there was their tax agent was involved as well. So they helped them create the situation to rip off IRD, basically.
So their tax agent wasn't a chartered accountant?
No, it wasn't a chartered accountant. So if you are looking to get your books and returns done, you should be looking for a chartered accountant, not a tax agent. Your tax agent is just someone that's registered with IRD and actually can file returns. They may not necessarily have the knowledge to do it right. Knowledge
is an amazing thing because end of the year, March has been and gone, and people are inclined to do their own tax returns.
Yes.
At their peril.
Yeah, I'd say if you're uncertain on any aspect of it, you need to stop and actually think about whether you should be doing it. If you've got a business or a farm, it's almost essential that you actually talk to your accountant to get it done, rather than you try and do it yourself, because you'll miss out on claims, you'll put the wrong things through, and you could potentially create a bigger mess for yourself than what you think, and potentially have an audit. And I know IRD are looking at people, they've been matching GST against income tax returns. If they're doing it themselves and they don't match, then they're coming after them via an audit mechanism.
You're asking for it, aren't you?
Yes, yep. You'll get yourself in trouble one way or another, so play it safe, put in the hands of an accountant. It is going to cost, but it's going to save you in the long run.
Yeah, that's exactly. It may cost you now, but it's going to save a lot later on. Tell me about benchmarking.
Yeah, for a while, businesses, especially your town businesses, have been able to benchmark against each other. So you can say, well, what's my business doing compared to everyone else on key variables? With the way the technology has moved, any type of business can now do it. So if you're a rural business, you should be thinking about whether you should get this done. It allows you to see whether you've actually got some big holes in your business, or if you're doing it right or wrong. There's an example recently where someone did it and they found that they're paying more for their fuel than everyone else. So over 6 months, by making changes, they've been able to save over $15,000 worth of expense just by doing that benchmarking exercise.
So how do you get involved?
You talk to your accountant. The accountants have access to the service. Because they're doing your books, they've got your data already, so they can feed it in and compare it against others that are in the same industry as you.
So your what do you call it?
Our Tritech.
Tritech, I thought
Yeah.
I think trifecta, but no, your Tritech is exactly what that is doing.
That's an example of what we can do. So we can say, well, yeah, we've got a lot of people on that. We can compare them within our own practice, and then we can compare them regionally and nationally as well. So you can get a good feel whether you're on the right track or not.
The neat thing about modern technology is you can service people in Northland or Southland or anywhere in between.
Indeed, we've got them up and down the country, and it's easy nowadays. You've got all the technology, you've got email, Skype, all sorts of services that make it easier to work with your accountant anywhere, anytime.
So it sort of blows the cover of saying, I'm sorry dear, I'm going into the accountant.
Yeah, it's almost not necessary now in the real world.
The boys can't use it anymore.
No, and
in fact, it's probably the women who actually do the accounts anyway.
Exactly, it's easier to 9 times out of 10 just do it either over the phone or webcam, that sort of thing. We don't need all the paperwork that we used to have in the past.
Kerry, thank you very much indeed. Just a moment, we're going to be talking about the dairy season with the Lincoln University Dairy Unit. Pete, Focus Day looming again.
Yeah, it's coming around again, so coming up on the 4th of May.
And you're expecting quite a crowd as per always.
Yeah, hopefully a few turn up, we can make it interesting enough for them, yep.
Let's look at your season. How's it ended up? Because you are heading towards the end.
Yeah, it's starting to wind down. It seems to have gone quite fast actually, but we've had a lot of rain the last couple of weeks or 3 weeks, so we're quite wet on this farm. Still milking twice a day at the moment, but chances are we'll be down to once a day next week if we get any more rain.
Fairly heavy dirt. Irrigation has been put away.
Yeah, no, definitely finished irrigating. We put it away sort of early March as we did last year, but last year we had to get it back out again, so this year I don't think we definitely won't have to get it back out again.
So you have had quite a bit?
Oh yeah, we've had over 200 mils in the last 4 weeks, so it's quite a lot for us. It's made us very wet.
Now, day-to-day stuff, you're going down to 1 day fairly soon, you think?
Yeah, probably next week. Just the weekend's looking quite good weather-wise, but next week due for a bit more rain, so if it rains again, definitely be on once a day.
And how many do you think you'll keep going through for as long as they can?
Yeah, we'll keep as many as we can. Obviously we've got a few light condition score cows that we'll knock off, so they need to put a bit more condition on, so they'll go. Lameness has been a bit of an issue with the wet tracks and that, so there'll be a few lame cows we'll have to stop milking as well.
Stock health though, has it been okay apart from they're getting tired?
Yeah, they always slow up this time of year. They're getting a bit slow to get to the cow shed, but they're very healthy, putting on a bit of condition and a bit of body weight, so there's a bit of supplement going out to them.
So what sort of supplements do you feed?
Yeah, bit of grass silage, and this year for the first time we're actually introduced them to fodder beet. Certainly it has had its challenges getting them onto it, so we've been feeding it for about 3 weeks now. It's been challenging, seeing they haven't seen it before, but most of them are eating it. There's probably about 30% that still aren't.
So you're digging and carrying, or you?
Yeah, so we're lifting it each day, so getting it stockpiled. We haven't actually grown in a paddock on farm, we're getting it lifted and brought onto farm.
Because once they get hold of it, they'll burst through fences to get to it.
Yeah, they certainly get a taste to it once they do. And that's the biggest issue of trying to get them all onto it, because if you feed too much, then someone just guts too much and it'll be too bad for them.
Now, bottom right-hand corner, did you make any money this year?
Oh, yeah, no, we're definitely we're on budget, so we're actually operating a wee bit below budget at the moment. So milk production will probably hit budget, but we won't go much over. We won't go yet, but we should still creep over 500 a cow for the season.
Replacements, or are you going to do any culling and get replacements in?
Yep. Well, obviously, yeah, we've got about 135 R2s coming next season, so with a higher empty rate this year of 16%, it doesn't give us too much room to move, but we'll probably have probably 15 to 20 cows that we can get rid of that are pregnant.
How are you going to address 16% empties?
Yes, it's challenging, isn't it? It's probably one of the worst seasons that we've had in terms of that. Our 6-week and calf rate was back a bit this year as well, so that was only 64%, I think it was, 6 weeks, so that didn't help. So we didn't end up too bad, only having 16 at the end, but it's certainly not where we want to be.
Was it seasonal? Was it something to do with weather or what?
Yeah, if we knew what it was, we'd be able to fix it, I suppose, but we're just not sure.
You're not thinking of doing some artificial hormone introduction or anything?
No, we're certainly, definitely looking at how we can improve it going forward. But the problem is that each season it's probably something different contributes to what happens, seasonal factors and feed quality and all that sort of stuff. This year's probably been more seasonal factors that's impacted the calf rates.
So 4th of May, people flooding in through the gates and they do a farm walk?
Well, there's certainly that option at the end of it, but that we'll get them out in the paddock, the whole lot, and look at the cows and look at pastures.
In the meantime, you've got a pretty active website.
Oh yes, that's certainly up and running, so updated every week on a Tuesday, so worth looking at.
What's the weather been doing? We've had a bit of rain. Has that been good or average?
Oh, the rainfall's been great because it's got us off to a pretty good start in terms of the recharge that we're going to need almost everywhere. Although places like Hawke's Bay, for example, they had way more rainfall than we got, and so they're seeing recharge already, mostly because the aquifers are relatively shallow. So they're seeing really good recharge in Hawke's Bay. We're going to see recharge. It's just going to take time. If you look at the 2 rainfall events we've had sort of in excess of 100 millimetres of rain across the Canterbury Plains, 120 to 140 millimetres across the plains. If you go out to West Melton, which is the sort of the first area where we look to see where the recharge is occurring, once everybody realised that actually we don't need to irrigate any further, we'll turn the irrigators off. We get this immediate kickback because everybody interferes with everybody in the groundwater system. As soon as everybody turns off, the water level just recovers very quickly, and that's what we call a kickback in the groundwater system. And in that West Melton area, it's of the order of 1 to 2 metres. If you go further up the plains, we have much deeper groundwater, higher pressures. It's usually of the order of 2 to 3 metres. So we've had that kickback. In West Melton, we've just started to see recharge occurring there, so we've had about a 40 centimetre rise in water levels in the last 2 to 3 days, or seen in the last 2 to 3 days. And that's sort of about the time frame we would normally see. It's been, if you look at that first rainfall we got back in early March, and then end of March, which sort of topped the soil profiles up a bit. And then suddenly we got that rainfall again the week leading up to Easter, and it's about the right time frame to start seeing that water come through. We won't see anything in the really deep aquifers for another 2 to 3 months. If this is enough rainfall to actually saturate the column all the way down.
Because it actually does take a long time to, and it gets less and less as it goes down, obviously.
Absolutely, yep. So we won't see anything there for the next couple of months, but that's good. At least by the time we get to July, June, July, we'll be able to see if this rainfall has had any effect in terms of recharging those deeper aquifers, which is where the majority of the groundwater is abstracted on the Canterbury Plains for irrigation.
Let's not forget the Bay of Plenty and the hiding that they've got, though.
Oh, yeah, they won't have any problem with groundwater. There's
in fact, they've got too much on
exactly,
top.
Yeah. So they've been pounded. I mean, if you go into the Auckland area, it's the same. Up around the Pukekohe area, they've been catching most of their runoff water in their catch ponds, and they've had torrential rain, and there's been quite a lot of sediment dumped into their catch ponds on those properties where there's agricultural practices taking place.
So the onions will take a hiding?
Most of the onion harvest in that area was complete. It's probably the potatoes that are more of the issue up there now, and getting some of the carrots out of the ground. If you get into the Waikato, where those same big companies are growing They took a bit of a pounding there as well. Their soils are a lot more free draining there, a lot of sandy pumice soils that they're growing on there, so they'll be more free draining, and they'll be able to get back on there and start harvesting again in the near future. Yep. Grapevines. I mean, did we get through the season all right? There's some pretty varied reports coming in, Tony. Yeah, if you listen to the clients that we deal with, the yields are not going to be high. That's the big thing. I mean, in the central Otago, for example, they're talking 3 to 3.5 tonnes to the hectare. They've had to do a lot of what we call shoulder thinning. They've taken a lot of the took a lot of the shoulders off the bunches to try and even up the ripening. The harvest has been slow and taking time because of waiting for the grapes to just get right to go into the winery. So generally you think that low harvest yields, high quality. It's probably not going to be one of those vintages this year. I mean, we had a very cool spring. They had a relatively warm period in January and early February, but then it's got cool and damp again heading into the harvest period. So it'll be okay, but it's not going to be one of those ones that you write down in your book, I must get the wines from that year. Yes, so it's a challenge. Let's talk about maintenance. Yeah, look, while everybody switches their irrigators off because they've had enough of irrigating, that's great. It's the time of the year now where people that have centre pivots and linear moves, wherever you are in New Zealand, make sure you've got them pointing into or downwind. We know what happened in 2013 when we had irrigators blowing over. Well, we just need to make sure these things are pointing upwind or downwind. If you need to anchor them at all, get yourself organised to anchor the spans. Otherwise, you know, if we get a large wind, get a high wind, then you could be in trouble again. And insurance has become more difficult for centre pivots and linears or irrigation equipment as a whole. It's time. You're not going to irrigate again. So if you've had a travelling irrigator with a lay flat hose, either lay it out flat under a tree, under a line of trees, and get those irrigators parked up against the trees so that they... but on the windward side, not the lee side. Not the leeward side, which we found out about again in 2013 and again in another year. The branches fall on the leeward side and they go straight through the irrigator when they fall. So get them parked up on the windward side and get them winterised up. If there were clearly things that needed to be maintained over the winter, things like if you're using surface water through irrigators, then the winter's the time to make sure that you clean all the nozzles out. Look for wear on any of the nozzles, replace anything that needs to be done. If there was a leak, make sure you get that leak fixed before the next irrigation starts. Tony, thank you very much indeed. Just a moment or two, we're going to be finding out how Robin Oakley has been faring with his vegetable growing. Robin, the season looks as though those spuds are coming out of the ground all right.
Yes, they are now. We've been very patiently waiting for the rain to stop and then the ground to dry out enough to get digging. So it's all guns blazing now.
Your parish covers a fair bit of dirt. I mean, you're in Hororata now, but you've got other areas. Has it been wet right over?
Yes, it's been wet everywhere, from Amberley, Southbridge, up here where we're trying to dig at the moment. So, yeah, we're wanting to work on all fronts at once at the moment.
But they are coming out in good order?
Yes, coming out in good order. We've had rain, but not too much. There's nothing drowned or anything ghastly like that. So, I think the rain's come gently, so the ground hasn't gone all hard or anything silly like that. So once it's drying out now, they're coming out very good.
And the other thing is, obviously, you've sprayed them off or whatever, so they're not still growing.
Oh, exactly, yes. And likes of this paddock here, it had a wee roundup over it about 4 weeks ago. There's just a little bit of grass struck in there, and normally we'd have them dug and it wouldn't be a problem, but I could just see if the wet weather lingered on, it was a good move to get that cleaned out.
You're starting to turn to religion a wee bit.
Yes, yes.
Tell me about the machine, because obviously the stones around this area and none of the stones go into the packet.
Yes, well, just as well too. They'd be a bit crunchy, wouldn't they? So we go through the ground at planting time and separate out the stones and the worst of the clods and get them out of the area that we're going to grow into. And then when the harvester comes through, it's reasonably stone and clod free, but in this paddock here there's actually some shingle patches, and we've probably been a bit greedy as far as some of the areas we've gone into with the planter and going through the harvester. We're just dealing with a bit of small stone in place there, but the machine's making a pretty good job now. It's dried out of separating that out, and have a couple of people up there to get the last few bits out.
I was just going to say, hence your staff that are sitting up on the top there.
Yes, I mean half the time they're up there with hands in their pocket, but when you hit a wee shingle patch, there's just a bit there to get out, and rather than slow down too much, you want to keep the speed up, so you have the extra ones up there just for that short time.
Looking back over the season, been disease free?
Yeah, it's been all over the place, like particularly this paddock here. They were setting up to be yet another very good yielding crop, and we had a nice gentle spring. Everything was looking good, but be fair to say they probably got a bit too soft in the tops, and then with all that strong nor'west we had through January, there was probably one wind too much for this crop here, and it blew quite a bit of the tops around too much, and the yield's down because of it, probably down 15 at least % from what we'd be looking to get.
So next year, where do you have to shift to stop getting those horrible little scabby things on your spuds?
Well, we don't really get any of those horrible little scabby things.
I know
on
you
our
don't, that's why I'm
potatoes,
asking you how you avoid them.
Yeah, so no, it's just about having good crop rotations and getting into ground that hasn't had potatoes for as long as possible. Never's usually the best, but that's sometimes asking a bit much. You do have to come back to paddocks again, but we've already been looking further out on this property as to which paddocks will be lining up for next year that have had quite a good interval since potatoes, if they've had potatoes in at all.
Because that's how you do avoid it, isn't it?
Yes, especially for washing quality potatoes. We're after that really good skin finish, and often the best way to achieve that is fresh, clean ground, and also a little bit of notice of what's been in the rotation leading up to it.
Other crops you're looking at?
Yeah, well, pumpkins at the moment. We're full noise into the pumpkin harvest. It's been held up a bit with the wet weather like everything else, so daylight today with a southerly wind, it's very good for that, because we don't like to pick the pumpkins up until they're actually dry, because they get all smudgy and get the dirt all around them, and it does seem to have an effect on their keeping quality. So daylight today, perfect for that. So I think we've got about another 5 maybe days to go to get that wrapped up, which will be good.
And then you've got your broccoli as well?
Yes, so we've been reasonably successful so far on the planting front at getting the plants in the ground in between the wet intervals. We seem to get a rain once a week, and just before the next one we get out there.
You get them in there.
We sneak them in, and we're planting up at Ambley at the moment, and the ground varies a bit up there, so there's some areas up there that once they get wet they tend to stay wet, and trying to get a fertiliser truck on or trying to work the ground, we're starting to have to work around parts of the paddock, and that just makes things a bit more difficult, but nothing like a good challenge.
You've always had challenges, haven't you?
Yeah, oh, that's growing, isn't it? Everything's different every year, and different soil types and areas you're working on, so if it wasn't challenging it'd be boring, and if it'd be boring we wouldn't be doing it, I guess.
Well, you'd probably have less grey hair.
Yeah.
But
oh, well.
people are saying that because of the bad weather the price of veggies is going to go up. Yes? No?
Yes, well that's been reflected right now with the price of broccoli. We've been cutting reasonably good volumes all the way through, but the wet weather has impacted some of the growing areas in the North Island. They've had trouble there with head rot and things like that, with just too much wet weather for too long, and it's something that we run the risk of getting down here as well. But so broccoli prices have firmed up as a result of that, but that can change again just as quickly. Potato prices, I'm hearing that the prices should be good and steady this year. I think the processors are after all the potatoes that they can get this year, and that has a big impact on our fresh market, because if there's such a big area and volume growing for that market, that if there's a small surplus there or a small amount that they're struggling to place and they come over into the fresh market, it can have a big impact on that, being the smaller of the two. But pumpkins will probably be more realistically priced this year. I mean that as far as the prices for us should be better. Last year the prices were very low on account of some big yields in the North Island, and I think overall some of the crops, particularly the South Island crops, kept quite well last year because of the warm dry growing season. This year the Nelson crops haven't been so good, and I think they'll be finished up fairly soon, so it's setting up a good stage for hopefully a healthy selling season down here this year, but some of our yields are back a bit on account of the weather, with a slow start in the spring and then a bit of a sticky part at the end, so I'm not sure how well they'll keep this year on account of the conditions they've grown through.
Now you're known for selling those baby ones as well as the bigger ones. The grading is done at the works, at your yard?
Yes, so everything's all taken out of the field in one sample and size-wise, and then it's back to the pack house for washing. A lot of the potatoes we're digging at the moment are going into storage, so we like to get the potatoes out while the conditions are very good for getting them out, so it's more efficient and it's better for the quality of the potatoes, it's better for the soil and the paddocks for people returning back to get next crops in there. So yeah, we're digging a lot of what we're doing at the moment is going straight to store, and some of it's going in to feed the pack house.
Therapy. Now, Claire, the first thing I want to know is, what is Bowen therapy?
Bowen therapy is basically a fairly gentle form of body work, and we're working mainly with superficial fascia. So
Which means?
That's connective tissue that runs throughout your whole body. Excuse me. It's around everything. So if you took the rest of everything else away in your body and just left the fascia, you'd still be able to recognise who you are. So the fact that it's like that means that we basically can communicate with the whole body by doing little moves on the body surface.
So Claire, what are you actually looking for?
Structural alignment and any muscles which appear to be more tense on one side than the other. The body doesn't function very well when it's not correctly structurally aligned, and this form of therapy is very good at helping the body to correct that alignment.
So to me already I'm thinking this is a cross between massage and chiropractic.
Yeah, it's funny because people always want to compare it with other modalities, but really it's a unique modality. I mean, it's the same in that we're trying to correct the body's dysfunction, but you can't say, is it like massage? Not really, because massage goes with the muscle fibres. We go across them in a single moves rather than repetitive type of moves that you have with massage. And chiropractors are basically working on the spine itself and trying to correct the dysfunction by realigning the joints, whereas we release the tissues and then the muscles will realign themselves. The joints will realign themselves.
What's this particular person's problem with their left leg?
There's nothing wrong with her leg, but we treat the whole body. Her problem was initially upper back and neck discomfort, pain, but basically that's a result of the rest of the body not being structurally correct. So often you have we talk about victims and criminals. So the victim is usually the bit that we feel is sore, and the criminal is the silent bit that you don't know is causing that problem. And this is why this therapy is so good, because we're treating the whole body. We pick up things that might be causing the problem, which could be long way from where you've actually got the pain.
So back into the lower back area.
Yep.
That's amazing, because you're right. There's no massage and there's no sort of bone cracking.
It's very gentle. We're just releasing all these the tissues, or we're giving the brain signals to come along and initiate its own release, basically.
A lot of people suffer from tight backs, tight necks, leg problems, of pain shooting down because of stress.
That's very real.
And this is actually able to, and I'm using layman's terms, but it's got to unknot all that stress and tension.
Definitely. It almost seems like it's too good to be true, and it is. It's an amazing form of body work.
So how long would an establishment like this, how long are you actually on the bed for?
Around about an hour. It's very specific to what that person needs on that day. So I don't charge per hour, it's per treatment. And it could be anything from half an hour through to an hour and a quarter, depending on what your body needs on that day. So.
Do you find that blokes prepared to come and stretch out on your bench?
Oh, definitely. If they can realise they're going to not have pain, they'll be here too. I also use this Bioptron light, which I'm just going to bring in as part of my treatment. It's a second modality, but it combines really well with the Bowen therapy. Basically, this is working on just visible light with different filters, and each filter has a different wavelength and therefore a different vibration, and it's the vibration that we're using as a therapeutic.
So this is not like the old heat ray lamps that we used to use a million years ago?
No, the heat it just runs at body temperature. So it's not heat, it's the vibration that is therapeutic. And what I'm going to do is start with stimulating the whole spinal column. So we do some light at the top of her base of the neck and then down the sacral area, and that will stimulate the whole spinal column.
That's not heat?
No, it does feel, some people say it feels warm. Depends on what your body's interpretation of that colour is. Sometimes it can feel warm, sometimes it can feel cold, sometimes people feel nothing. So it's just what an individual feels from it. But it actually does run at 37 degrees, so it's around about body temperature.
And you're fixing people?
I'm enabling people's bodies to fix themselves, basically.
I'm not quite sure how it all works, but let's just say that it certainly does. In a moment or two, we're going to be looking at a very good breeder of Arabian horses. David, Holly Farm Arabians, how long have you been involved with Arabian horses?
Well, Dad started it in 1961, and he started because he was looking for a slightly bigger horse for his from ponies for my brothers and sisters, and he came across some part-bred Arabians down south from the McIndoe family, and they were all part-bred Arabians, and he actually sort of from there grew an interest in the purebreds. And I think when he sort of got the bug and decided to go for it, he bought all of McIndoe's purebred mares, and he found a stallion bred by Lady Wentworth in England in the North Island, who was brought over by Mr. Booth as a retired timber merchant, as his personal life's dream to have an Arabian stallion to ride. And Dad was actually able to purchase him as well, and came home, and the pony breeders were very excited about this new Arabian stallion that was bred by Lady Wentworth, and they said to Dad that there was the possibility of some mare up in the Cashmere Hills. And so he went that day, was taken that day by Harrison Wilkie to find out that the mare was actually from England, and she had 2 filly foals, but they weren't registered. And so there's 3 females, actually purebred females in the Cashmere Hills, and they were the nucleus and basically all of the mares in the South Island, and then Dad's stallion. So he sort of started with a rip, roar and bust, and I was born in 65, so I don't know when I started.
Probably not long after that, actually.
And I was the youngest. I was probably the least talented as far as a rider goes. Wasn't really a pony clubber or a show jumper or anything else. So I was actually more interested in breeding from my ponies rather than riding them. And then I got fascinated with the Arabian horse, its history, where it's come from, and I guess from then on I was probably a nutter for anything Arabian horse or Arabian culture or so forth. That was really me.
Because there's several sectors, isn't there? There's Polish and Russian and German and...
Yeah, so over the history-wise, through the wars, when the horse was part of the makeup of the success of your country and the army, they recognised that the introduction of Arabian breeding actually gave the horses strength and agility and endurance, and that replaced the need for armour and a great big strong horse just to carry it all. And so they were actually the Arabian actually changed the way wars were fought, and for that reason then most of the European countries in particular, and one of the few or two of the few remaining ones are Germany, Poland and Russia, and but most European countries had a state stud which maintained a purebred program to support the part-bred breeding of horses around Europe. So most breeds have actually bred up from the Arabian horse or been improved by. Like the thoroughbred is basically a hybrid of an Arabian horse bred specifically for the English requirement to race.
They've got different attributes, their eyes setting and their breathing ability.
Yeah, the Arabian in its pure form definitely has traits that set it apart from other breeds, and you really do want to be able to recognise those traits when looking at a horse. And so a purebred tends to have a wide forehead, the eyes set well apart, and an eye that is set on the side of the head and low in the head. So you'll notice that most breeds, the horse's eyes are quite close to the ears, whereas an Arabian, if you go from the tip of the ear to the eye and from the eye to the muzzle, the eye is actually about in the middle of the head. And apart from being attractive, I think it's actually partly to do with sight, like their eyes are set on the outside of the head rather than in front, and well down so that they can actually see what's going on around. And even though it's not a big head, it's actually their nostrils are have the ability to enlarge when they're breathing. So they're not a thick-skinned muzzle, they're actually quite a refined skin and very elastic, and that gives them the ability to actually draw in the ear, and that's where they have been often referred to as the drinkers of the wind when they're racing.
Now, endurance and speed.
The likes of, in comparison to your thoroughbred, which is a fast racehorse over good distances, the Arabian is a horse that has the endurance ability to keep going over extensive distances. So if you go to the extreme, your quarter horse is a quarter mile racehorse, your thoroughbred is your middle distance racehorse, and the Arabian horse is a long distance racehorse.
How long?
Well, your world championships are 100 mile or 160 kilometres, and the world record for a 160 kilometre is 5 hours 45 minutes, and that was actually set by a gelding bred in Australia, but actually a grandson of one of my stallions. So he's pretty
Proud
good.
moment.
Mm.
And you're riding yourself?
I've always ridden, and even though I wasn't really a specifically good rider or show rider, I decided to try and learn later on in life. So as an adult I started taking lessons and rode, and had some success in the show ring as well as dressage and your horse society sports. But the sport of endurance was something that I used to partake in mainly to prove the stallions. So I tended to just bring the stallion out to ride for a while, and then I'd go back to showing and breeding. But the actual bug for endurance really bit in the mid-90s, And so since then I've actually represented New Zealand twice at World Championships. So in 2000 in France and 2005 in Dubai. And I have had a team of horses competing around the New Zealand circuit now for probably about 15 years.
With a bit of success?
With a bit of success, yes. I mean, I tend to have too many, and I end up giving my horses to other riders who come in from South Africa and various places around the world because they want to ride in New Zealand. So I tend to actually enjoy seeing my horses out there doing it, which often costs me my own success, but it's always a pleasure, and yes, it's all part of my breeding. So
why so many of them greys?
The original ones were grey that Dad bought in, and so I guess the predominant colour has been grey within our bloodlines, and I guess from my own point of view, I have actually enjoyed a lot of success with grey horses, and so I tend to like them as well.
I mean, you're saying that these three will end up as greys?
These three fellas here are definitely future grey horses, and so born chestnut and then now going into their winter and foal coat, and the grey I think is sort of like a classical Arabian colour to me, but you can get all colours, as in bays and chestnuts and blacks, and we had I had the big shock in that we had a foal born this year. It was the first foal of the mare, and she just happened to start foaling when my son saw her, and the rule is that if you see it first, you have first chance to claim it. So of course he claimed it as his, and as this foal came out, and I'm thinking this is a really unusual colour, and we've actually had a black filly born this season, and my son's claimed it.
The future for Arabian horses in New Zealand is very strong.
I think the future in New Zealand has a lot of future because of the fact that New Zealand is such a great country to grow horses, and we have always been more focused on the athletic ability of the horses rather than the extreme traits of the show horse. So I think that New Zealand has a strong position to enjoy the horses firsthand rather than using professionals. We sort of have a fairly good base of horsemanship, and our horses are bred for athletic ability rather than just pure prettiness. So that's where our future lies, and then of course the rest of the world will and have actually bought a lot of our horses because of that reason. So a little bit the same as the staying power of the thoroughbred. This part of the world does very well producing sound athletic horses. So.
Burials and funeral services, there's those who would want to do their own caskets. Is it a minefield?
No, not really. There's a couple of rules, and they relate to the transportation of a deceased person. So there's no rules around caskets per se. A lot of the councils have rules regarding a rigid container, and for obvious reasons, it's very, very difficult. Well, put it this way, you can't put a body bag into a grave. Because they can't be set properly on top of the grave safely. So they want a rigid leak-proof container.
So you do need a casket of some sort?
Yeah, of some sort. And so, yeah, I understand that there's a number of, I think they call themselves coffin clubs around the country, which is fellas in their back shed who have decided to make a casket for whatever reason. Possibly it's cost, possibly it's because they just want to do something different, and that's fine. There's no real issue for it. Most funeral companies will charge a fee, a handling fee, on the casket, which will negate a lot of the cost. The reason being is that we're responsible for the way that, for want of a better word, apparatus functions for the time of the funeral. So I had a situation where the family built their own casket, which was nice, except they put drawer handles on it, little wee metal drawer handles, and when, by the weight of the casket, with the weight of the person in it, it was actually couldn't physically pick it up without cutting your hands. And so there's little things like that. So we always recommend that if someone is interested in doing this, and by all means go ahead.
For whatever reason.
For whatever reason, have a chat to your local funeral provider and get some guidelines. Often caskets are made far more substantially than they need to be, which then makes them far too heavy, which causes a problem for pallbearers. There's a cascade of issues. So get some specs would be a good idea. Also, we've had people have an odd impression of what a casket actually, where it needs to be wider and where it needs to be narrow and all the rest of it, and does it need to be shaped like the traditional English coffin, or can it be a couch style American? There's also those questions. We're happy to answer them and happy to give people an idea of where to head with it. Do we prefer it? No. For a couple of reasons. It's a profit centre for most funeral homes, and that's fine.
You know, to be realistic.
Yeah, to be realistic, it's a profit centre, so we're not going to be excited about it. Having said that, I've seen some wonderful ones made by families, and they have significant, well, cultural is not the right word, but they have significant personal significance. You know,
I mean, there's one that I can think of, Roddy. The man he ran a sawmill.
Yep.
And his son, who'd taken over the business, he knocked up a coffin for him.
Why not?
You know,
there's no reason why you can't do it, but it'd be like, do it right by getting the right information. Yep. And I think
get some plans.
Yeah, get some plans, exactly. I mean, there's a reason why. Also, when we're digging a grave, the council specifies very specifically for each casket the width of the handles, the width of the casket, the depth, etc. All of those things have rules and regulations attached to them. And so as a funeral director, we need to inform them well in advance of what we're actually putting into the ground. There's nothing really to stop you putting any type, shape, box, but it may influence the type of hole that they have to dig. We had a situation very recently where the casket was slightly wider than the hole that was dug.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, the problem is where it was wider, it was halfway down. The hole hadn't been dug particularly well. And so we've found that with family caskets, when they say, oh yes, we're going to build a casket that's X feet or metres long by X wide, etc., if they don't stick to those and all of it, because things evolve as you're building it, then it can cause problems. So it's just a matter of good communication, find out some information from us about what's the best way to do it, find out what the rules are in terms of there needs to be a leak-proof liner in it, the handles need to be of sufficient size and heft that you should better support the entire casket off one handle. Again, you can imagine if a handle come off en route,
absolutely,
it causes you problems. So things like that, and we're happy to chat about it, absolutely.
Those who want to be buried on the farm.
Okay, still can't unless they have a ginormous farm and there's no public burial ground within 32 kilometres. So essentially, you would need to get your map out, get a compass, and work out if that. And there's very few places in New Zealand there won't be a public cemetery inside that circle.
Really, because we don't sort of see them, really, do you?
No, you often don't see them because the buildings that they were associated with are now gone. A lot of them are church cemeteries, or they're trust cemeteries, but they are still public cemeteries, and the way that the Department of Internal Affairs views it is that if that cemetery is available, that's where you should go. They don't want people burying people willy-nilly. It causes all sorts of problems down the track, maybe 30, 40, 50 years' time, where land essentially has to be ring-fenced because it's got a burial ground. As you can understand, there are cultural implications for it for future generations, and so by determining where we're burying our people, we can sort of say, well, this area is a grave, it's going to be a grave in perpetuity. Burying someone on the back 40 because that was their favourite vista of the farm, while it's a romantic notion, is not a practical notion for future generations, particularly if the land changes hands into another family, because they don't have the same connection, but they should, theoretically, they've got to look after that grave as if it was their own. So if you want to be buried on your own land, there is a process. You can go through it and you can apply. It takes about 2 years to go through the Department of Internal Affairs, and they will be quite stringent about it, but it can be done. Is it going to get easier in the future? We think so. They think that public land like dockland is potentially going to be opened up for woodland burials, but that is still in Parliament process at the moment. It's on its second or third reading, and it's been kicked around the House.
And it's an election year, so it's not a priority.
Exactly. So yes, is it going to happen in future? I would say without a doubt some changes will be made, but they won't. It's not going to be all of a sudden that and sprayed and down the backyard.
Exactly. It opens the door for ashes then being scattered.
Ashes are a different beast altogether. All right. You can scatter or inter ashes on public land with permission. So if it's monitored by DOC or an iwi, you need to contact the owners of the land, and often they will give you permission, or they won't, or they'll suggest an area where you can. On private land, you can inter ashes. There's no problem there, and you can scatter ashes generally on public land. I put a but in there. Areas that are frequented lots by people, parks. They had issues in Wellington with the Rose Garden in the botanical gardens there, as in there was lots of people thought that was a lovely area to scatter the ashes, and that was great until all the roses started dying because of the chemical imbalance that caused in the ground. So they've stopped that. So, but if you wanted to go down to a river mouth or something like that and do that, it can be done. Just realise there's cultural implications. If it's a food gathering area, it makes it tapu. If you do that, so you've got to use your common sense, and if in doubt, ask permission.
Roddy, thank you very much indeed. If you'd like to recap on what Roddy was saying, or any of the other stories on this week's program, you can go to our website, which is ontheland.co.nz. I'm Rob Cope-Williams. You've either been watching or you've just missed the program, but I will be back at the same time next week. Until then, bye now.